he was scarred, and lithe-muscled, and ready for instant action at all times. Through the mop of Airedale whiskers that covered his face, his bright eyes were ever alert, and always they watched the back trail, as he wondered why the slim, blue-eyed girl they both loved and missed so much did not come. And vaguely he wondered why it was that his master always went on, and never waited for her to catch up with him. And Jolly Roger was changed. He was not the plump and rosy-faced wilderness freebooter who whistled and sang away down at Cragg's Ridge even when he knew the law was at his heels. The steadiness of their flight had thinned him, and a graver look had settled in his face. But in his clear eyes was still the love of life, a thing even stronger than the grief which was eating at his heart as their trail reached steadily toward the Barren Lands. In the sunset glow of this late afternoon, Peter's watchful eyes saw his master draw forth their treasure. It was something he had come to look for, and expect, once, twice, and sometimes half a dozen times between the rising and the setting of the sun. And at night, when they paused in their flight for the day, Jolly Roger never failed to do what he was doing now. Peter drew nearer to where his master was sitting with his back to the big rock, and his eyes glistened. Always he caught the sweet, elusive perfume of the girl when Jolly Roger drew out their preciously guarded package. He unwrapped it gently now, and in a moment held in his hands the tress of Nada's hair, the last of her they would ever possess or see. And Peter wondered again why they did not go back to where they had left the rest of the girl. Many times, seeing his restlessness and his yearning, Jolly Roger had tried to make him understand. And Peter tried to comprehend. But always in his dreams he was with the girl he loved, following her, playing with her, fighting for her, hearing her voice, feeling the touch of her hand. In his dog soul he wanted her, just as Jolly Roger wanted her with all the yearning and heartbreak of the man. Yet always when he awoke from his dreams they went on again, not south, but north. To Peter this was hopeless mystery, and he possessed no power of reason to solve it. Nor could he speak in words the message which he carried in his heart, that last crying agony of the girl when she had sent him out on the trail of Roger McKay, entreating him to bring back the man she loved and would always love in spite of all the broken and unbroken laws in the world. That night, as they lay beside the burntwood, Peter heard his master crying out Nada's name in his sleep. And the next dawn they went on, still farther north. In these days and weeks, with the hot inundation of the wilderness about him, McKay fought doggedly against the forces which were struggling to break down the first law of his creed. The law might catch him, and probably would, and when it caught him, the law might hang him, and probably would. But it would never know him. There was something grimly and tragically humorous in this. It would never know of the consuming purity of his worship for little children, and old people, and women. It would laugh at the religion he had built up for himself, and it would cackle tauntingly if he dared to say he was not wholly bad. For it believed he was bad, and it believed he had killed Jed Hawkins, and he knew that 700 men were anxious to get him, dead or alive. But was he bad? He took the matter up one evening with Peter. "If I'm bad, maybe it isn't all my fault, Pied-Bot," he said. "Maybe it's this," and he swept his arms out to the gathering night. "I was born in the open, on a night just like this is going to be. My mother, before she died, told me many times how she watched the moon come up that night, and how it seemed to look down on her, and talk to her like a living thing. And I've loved the moon ever since, and the sun, and everything that's outdoors. And if there's a God, I don't believe He ever intended man to make a law that wasn't right according to the plans He laid out. That's where I've got in wrong, Pied-Bot. I haven't always believed in man-made law, and I've settled a lot of things in my own way. And I guess I've loved trees and flowers and sunshine and wind and storm too much. I've just wandered. And I've done things along the way. The thrill of it got into me, Pied-Bot, and the law wants me." Peter heard the subdued humor of the man, a low laugh that held neither fear nor regret. "It was the treaty money first," he went on, leaning very seriously toward Peter, as if he expected an argument. "You see, Yellow Bird was in that particular tribe, Pied-Bot. I remember her as she looked to me when a boy, with her two long, shining black braids, and her face that was almost as beautiful to me as my mother's. My mother loved her, and she loved my mother, and I loved Yellow Bird, just as a child loves a fairy. And always Yellow Bird has been my fairy, Peter. I guess child worship is the one thing that lasts through life, always remaining ideal and never forgotten. Years after my mother's death, when I was a young man and had been down to Montreal and Ottawa and Quebec, I went back to Yellow Bird's tribe. And it was starving, Pied-Bot, starving to death." Reminiscent tenderness and humor were gone from McKay's voice. It was hard and flinty. "It was winter," he continued, "the dead of winter, and cold, so cold that even the wolves and foxes had buried themselves in. No fish that autumn, no game in the deep snows, and the Indians were starving. Pied-Bot, my heart went dead when I saw Yellow Bird. There didn't seem to be anything left of her but her eyes and her hair, those two great shining braids, and eyes that were big and deep and dark, like beautiful pools. Boy, you never saw an Indian like Yellow Bird, cry. They don't cry very much. But when that childhood fairy of mine first saw me, she just stood there, swaying in her weakness, and the tears filled those big, wide-open eyes and ran down her thin cheeks. She had married Slim Buck. 2 of their 3 children had died within a fortnight. Slim Buck was dying of hunger and exhaustion. And Yellow Bird's heart was broken, and her soul was crying out for God to let her lie down beside Slim Buck and die with him, when I happened along. Peter," Jolly Roger leaned over in the thickening dusk, and his eyes gleamed. "Peter, if there's a God, and He thinks I did wrong then, let Him strike me dead right here. I'm willin'. I found out what the trouble was. There was a new Indian agent, a cur, and near the tribe was a free trader, another cur. The 2 got together. The agent sent up the treaty money, and along with it, underground, mind you, he sent a lot of whiskey to the free trader. Inside of 5 days the whiskey got the treaty money from the Indians. Then came winter. Everything went bad. When I came, and found out what had happened, 18 out of 60 had died, and inside of another 2 weeks half the others would follow. Pied-Bot, away back somewhere there must have been a pirate before me, mebby a great-grandfather of mine. I set out, I came back in 3 days, and I had a sledge load of grub and warm things to wear, plenty of them. My God, how those starving things did eat! I went again, and returned in another week, with a still bigger sledge load. And Yellow Bird was getting beautiful again, and Slim Buck was on his feet, growing strong, and there was happiness, and I think God A'mighty was glad. I kept it up for 2 months.